Hello, everyone, and welcome to my entrepreneur interview series, part of my autumn adventure tour. I'm here today with the wonderful Matt Maxwell, a longtime client and friend, and now collaborator on some very exciting things. Hello, Matt. I'm excited to
Hi,
interview you today.
thanks.
Yeah. And just to give you a little bit about Matt, he is an author who has written a life-changing book, and I'm not just saying that. People literally live reviews that talk about how it changed their lives. He is a wonderful coach. He is an actor. He is just a very talented human all around. Matt, what else do you want folks to know about you?
Hmm. Yes, coach. Probably also in terms of my mix, I do like leadership training workshops
Hmm,
for organizations, and I think that covers it. I'm
cool.
awesome. I used to be
And
a lawyer. Did you say I used to be a lawyer?
no, he used to be a lawyer,
Uh,
and he aced the LSAT, just saying.
yeah, I sometimes teach LSAT classes too. Yeah, I think that's an important part of my journey. I used to work in big law, and so entrepreneurship was terrifying for many reasons, and one of them was like I left something quite cushy, but that I didn't find particularly fulfilling.
Yeah. And one of my favorite memories of you is you put on one of those big sandwich boards, the ones that have a bit like you've seen them, people wear them. And what did
Yes,
it say, Matt? You were standing outside of a law firm and it said,
it said, "Lawyers, you don't have to be miserable anymore."
so
In New York, I sit outside of the largest law firm in New York.
so you can tell that Matt is an innovative, creative, provocative entrepreneur.
Here we
And
go.
I'm
Here we go.
excited, yeah,
Here we go. Let's
excited to
see if you
talk
can
to him
see it.
about, oh, there he is. So good. I'm excited to talk to him about business. We're going to be dropping some wisdom bombs for entrepreneurs and also about his experience working with me in a coaching capacity and in the mastermind. So, Matt, let's start with talking about your business. And I've got a couple of questions. The first is that being an entrepreneur can be, it can create decision fatigue. And how do you move forward with your business, especially when there's such an array of choices of which avenue to take, who to hire, all of those things?
Yes. Um, the answer to that is I don't know, and neither do you. I mean, neither do you, Megan. Neither do you, person listening, right? So the trick is to be okay with not knowing,
Mm,
right? Is this the best thing? Is this the? There's no way to know.
no,
There's no way to know in life or in our business is what the best thing is. There's no way to know. Now we can learn. We can learn some things that don't seem to work. We can learn some things that do seem to work, right? So we can learn, but we'll never know for sure if that's the best thing. And for me, that's been really hard as a lawyer, where it's very much like, this is, and you gotta just do exactly the right thing and avoid risk. And I would say there's just a wide array of choices. And the way that I've dealt with that is there's a few things that I think are important. One is uh, the lean startup helped with this. If you haven't read the lean startup, it's awesome. But really choosing that what you're going to be up to in your business is learning what works. So my goal is not to have everything work. My goal is to find out what works. And so then I can experiment. Okay, well, let me try this. And if it doesn't work, great. I learned that doesn't work. So experimentation, being okay with like learning. My goal is to learn here, not necessarily always get it right or have it be perfect. Yes. And I would say I've learned a lot of things that don't work.
yeah.
And a few things where I'm like, that does work. Awesome. Which is cool. And the other thing for me is, well, there's a few things. So that's one. Another thing with choice in our business. How do I grow? What do I offer? What exactly do I, right? There's just kind of this unlimited array of choice, especially if you're starting your own business and kind of inventing it. The other thing is 80/20. If you don't know, like 80/20 principle, look it up. But the way I feel that the idea of 80/20, right, is that like 20% of what we do actually generates most of our results, right? There's kind of like activity, and then there's like these actions that actually seem to generate more of a difference.
Mm.
And so part of what I'm up to is like, what actually doesn't really create a difference? And what can I do that actually really does? And again, you don't get to know exactly what that is, right? You practice and try out things. And I would say for me, one of the really satisfying things about having my business is that it's been a place to listen for inspiration.
Mm.
Some of the really magical things that have happened in my business, which I don't have as like, it's still kind of a baby, but the magic things that have happened have come from, I'm going to do this thing, right? Just a feeling, not like, sometimes that's been because somebody has invited me to do something and I've been like, yes, that feels right. Other times it's just kind of, I'll give an example. An example of that is I was doing this uh, training and I was kind of present. I was just very, it felt very present and centered. And towards the end of the day, I was like, oh, I'm going to post on LinkedIn about how miserable lawyers tend to be and how they couldn't not be so miserable. And I don't have any social media plan. It probably would be good to have more of a system. I have none. I just post when I feel like it. And I felt like it. And so I wrote this little thing and I found this little article about how miserable lawyers are, like survey, Chicago Tribune, whatever. I just posted this little thing. Lawyers, it's pretty bad, right? For some of us, it doesn't have to be. Whatever, just post it just because I just felt to. And then somebody who I went to law school with, it turns out, was starting a podcast called the Former Lawyer Podcast. And she saw my post. She's like, oh my gosh, Matt would be great on my podcast. She invited me to do the podcast. I saw your post. Oh my gosh, do you want to be on? Okay, yeah, sure. So then I'm on her podcast. And then 6 months later, a lawyer reaches out to me and says, oh, I heard you on this podcast. I'd love to work with you. And then just last month, somebody else whose sister had heard me on the podcast and said, hey, this coach might be great for you, reached out to me. And right, it's like this kind of like a magical flow
Mm.
of things that have come from this one moment where I was like, I'm going to post about lawyers. So enjoying that, like leaning into that, for me at least, that's a really fun and special part of running my business.
I love that. Um, yeah, you are really good at taking inspired action. You're really good at listening to your intuition. And one thing I've always loved about watching you work is that when you get an intuition about something, it doesn't matter what other people's opinions are or what they
Mm,
suggest. Like you're like,
yes.
no, this is how it's going. And I think about that a lot with your book, which has done incredibly well
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
even
It's
got
awesome.
translated into like
Yeah. Another
Lithuanian.
great example. Yeah. Another great example where
Yeah.
I was doing a retreat actually. And I was just like, oh, I'm going to write this book. And I spent time on it. It was scary and terrifying and ups and downs. And I definitely needed a coach and mastermind. And we'll talk about that. But like, I needed a lot of support to actually fulfill that like feeling that like I meant to write this, and then marketing it. And that's, there's all this stuff in that journey. But just like trusting something in me says, go in this direction.
Mm.
And just like with that, LinkedIn post, the fun of entrepreneurship and life can be like, I followed that thing, and in some ways it's turning out like I hoped, right? And in other ways, I'm completely by surprised, right? Like these seeds grow in, sometimes they don't grow at all, and we're like, what the heck? And other times they grow in completely unexpected ways. And so yes, I actually um, just got
Oh.
the
Oh my God, look at that.
it's so cool.
It says
So
how to hold a cockroach, by the way, for those who are
yes,
like,
in
I don't
English, this is how to hold a cockroach if you don't read Slovenian.
know.
But one of the unexpected things for me was self-published my book and started sharing it. And people have read it and loved it. And this Slovenian publisher found it and said, "We'd like to publish your book in Slovenian." I'm like, yay! So that's the kind of thing like you would never plan.
Yeah.
I did not have a plan for like, let me get a Slovenian publisher to this up. But magic things happen if you just kind of follow that flow that you feel and just keep planting seeds.
Mm. So If we transition into talking a little bit more, because you've alluded to it about the business mastermind,
Mhm.
um, what inspired you to join?
Hmm. Well, I just really like Megan here at Morrison. She's fun, and I like any excuse to spend time with her. And I recall the conversation we had about it, and I was kind of like, well, I have this business, it's important to me, but what really matters to me is my book. I need a structure with people who are supportive and will hold me accountable. I really, really, really want to do this, and it is not predictable that I will on my own. And I knew that. And did this have to be the structure that through which the book got created? No, but I had to have some structure. And so for me, I kind of saw that you would be a great stand, right? Like a stand in the future of me having written this book, and that the group would do.
Let the
Uh,
record show, I bought the first book before it was written.
that's true. That's true. It wasn't even that. I think I had the first few chapters of this version of the book, but for a long time, I had number of copies. So for about a year, because I think you paid me a year before I actually published it. And for a long time, I had this little note that was like number of copies sold, and it just said one, your copy.
Yes, so good.
It's true. You did buy the first copy.
And what did you accomplish through the experience in the mastermind?
Well, it was great because, having a lot of support around the book was my main intention. And also in the work we did together as a group, like naturally, my business also started to flourish. We learned a lot. I don't know what kind of format you're going to have for your upcoming group, but we had like great readings that we did together. We learned a lot as a group together. And it's one thing to read a book about whatever business or leadership or whatever. It's one thing to read that on your own. It's another when you're like in a group that's regularly meeting, talking about the topics, then it becomes part of your language as a group. So you're really like empowering the stuff you're learning as a group. And so not only did I finish my book with like awesome group support, but also really launched my business. Announced it, kind of took the steps with that like awesome sense of support from the group. So really launched my business through that structure.
Hmm. If someone were to be like, "Hey Matt, what's it like to be in Meg's mastermind?" What would you say?
I would say, what would I say? I mean, it's hard to predict because I love the people in our group so much, right? Every group's going to kind of have its own like flavor of wonderful people that feel drawn to it. So I'd say like it's unpredictable because it's not just Meg. Of course, Megan creates this nice space, but really like each person becomes so important to the other people in the group. And our group is just like I deeply love every person in the group and am thrilled by their successes. And I know that they're thrilled by mine, which is pretty unique, I think. A lot of the time it's like, oh, cool, good for you. And you're kind of like jealous or whatever. But the space that we created as a group that I trust will be in any group Megan leads is like genuine excitement and support for each other. So it's unpredictable. And I think it's also predictable that people will really bond with each other in a way that really supports what they're up to.
Hmm. And if someone were to ask you, "Hey, who's Meg as a coach?" Like I could hire so many different coaches, but who's Meg? What would you say
Mm,
about that?
mm. Play, total non-judgment, like really clearly non-judgment, just like encouragement and play and love and laughter and appreciation. Like I really feel like anything that I would bring that I might be like, oh, this is kind of weird to talk about, or I feel embarrassed that I haven't whatever or whatever. It's just like greeted with like open arms, laughter, enjoyment, and then like, and what's next? Right. Also a stand for like pushing it forward.
I love it. I think that everyone listening should follow Matt and his work because it is brilliant. It's innovative. I don't
Yes.
even know what you're doing next. I know we're going to have a reunion of the mastermind to like read that book whenever it is ready. But if people want to find out more about you and your work, where can they
Mhm.
go?
Read my book. How to Hold a Cockroach, a book for those who are free and don't know it. It's beautiful. Well, about 6% of our viewers think it's real stupid. So you might be one of them, but
And
most
get the
people seem to
audiobook.
really love it.
Get the
The
audiobook.
audiobook just came out and it's
Mhm.
beautiful. You can find more about my coaching at thisishearthstone.com. What else? I have a podcast called Cultivating Courage. It's wonderful. I think it's beautiful. So if you want some inspiring listens on your drives or whatever, Cultivating Courage is a good place to go.
Hmm. Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you, Meg.